19 states sue the Trump administration over cuts to the Department of Health and Human Services funding and staff. New executive orders include stripping gain-of-function research for federal funding from places like China and Iran. And Education Secretary Linda McMahon hits Harvard from the top rope. I'm Tony Kinnett of the Daily Signal's Tony Kinnett Cast, syndicated nationally at 7 p.m. Eastern. It is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. This is the Daily Signal's top news in 10. 19 states, led by New York as well as Washington, D.C., are suing the Trump administration over a downsizing and cut list to the Department of Health and Human Services, which were estimated to save taxpayers about $1.8 billion per year through a reduction in workforce of about 10,000 full-time employees. The memo from the Department of Health and Human Services announced a streamlining of functions of the department, alleging that the 10 to 20,000 full-time employee cuts through downsizing mainly resulted in cutting a lot of the redundant staff and individuals at the department who were not seen as working full-time. Quote, "We aren't just reducing bureaucratic sprawl, we are realigning the organization with its core mission and our new priorities in reversing the chronic disease epidemic," Secretary RFK Jr. said back in March. The department will do more, a lot more, at a lower cost to the taxpayer. The lawsuit asks Judge Melissa R. DuBose, a federal judge in Rhode Island, to reject the entire reorganization of the department laid out in the March 27th memo as unconstitutional, suggesting that the layoffs of the employees would harm state health programs, as the lawsuit puts it, obviously. Nothing in the U.S. Constitution requires a specific number of employees in the Department of Health and Human Services. None of the laws passed by Congress, the continuing resolutions, or the budgets passed by Congress in the last several decades allocate any specific amount of funding to the Department of Health and Human Services beyond a couple of very general allocations to programs both at the state level and national level, none of which are being cut by the Trump administration. Heading up the lawsuit, Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, suggested that this administration isn't streamlining the federal government. They're firing scientists who research infectious diseases and silencing doctors who care for pregnant people, otherwise known as pregnant women, and shutting down the programs that help firefighters and miners breathe. A lot of really emotional rhetoric. And I say that because this is a clip from Letitia James speaking yesterday about the lawsuit.
And you want me to sit in my seat and stand idly by and allow this craziness to happen? You can come after me if you want, but you elected me to stand up. You elected me to use the law. You elected me to go to court. You elected me to continue to challenge this administration. You elected me to stand up for the least of God's children. You elected me to continue fighting on. And I will fight on.
The current New York Attorney General is also under investigation for serious mortgage fraud after it was discovered she had purchased several properties allegedly to gain lower mortgage rates by suggesting that she lived at an entirely different address where she does not hold residence, which is a very serious crime. It's also unclear what constitutional authority a federal judge in Rhode Island would have to cause the entire executive branch to organize itself in a certain way. Article 2 authority of the Constitution does prevent a federal judge from exercising authority over either the executive or the legislative branches. Speaking of medical policy, the United States has now suspended the funding of gain-of-function research in countries like China and Iran. The President of the United States signed an executive order on this yesterday afternoon.
The first relates to gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research is a type of biomedical research where pathogens are adulterated, viruses are adulterated to make them more potent or to change the way that they function. Many people believe that gain-of-function research was one of the key causes of the COVID pandemic that struck us in the last decade. What this executive order does, first of all, it provides powerful new tools to enforce the ban on federal funding for gain-of-function research abroad. It also strengthens other oversight mechanisms related to that issue and creates an overarching strategy to ensure that biomedical research in general is being conducted safely and in a way that ultimately protects human health more.
It's a big deal. It could have been that we wouldn't have had the problem we had. Right?
A lot of people say that, sir.
If we had this done earlier. Thank you.
Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. also spoke on the matter.
As you pointed out, gain-of-function studies are the kind of science that is designed to make microbes and pathogens more virulent, more transmissible, and more deadly. It was in this country, they started doing it in 1947, the military and the intelligence agencies, in order to develop bioweapons. In 1969, President Nixon banned it all and shut down Fort Detrick, shut down all the labs. That ban, and then signed the Bioweapons Convention. That ban lasted till 2001. And after the anthrax attacks, Anthony Fauci essentially restarted the arms race and the bioweapons arms race, and did it under the pretension of developing vaccines because of the same science that you develop bioweapons and vaccines. In 2014, 3 of his bugs had escaped, and 300 scientists wrote letters to President Obama asking him to shut down Anthony Fauci. President Obama declared a moratorium, but instead of shutting down his experiments, he moved them offshore, mainly to the Wuhan lab. And now, the principal institutions of our government, the CIA, the FBI, the State Department, Department of Energy, all say that it is most likely that those experiments resulted in the COVID-19 pandemic beginning in 2019. So President Trump today moved to shut down this kind of research in this country and to stop funding it abroad.
It is likely, based on intelligence data from the United States, the intelligence partners of the United States through the Five Eyes, as well as other independent intelligence agencies and investigations, that gain-of-function laboratories in Wuhan, China, were most likely responsible for the creation, the manipulation, and the disbursement of the COVID-19 virus, which killed millions around the globe. And last but not least, Secretary Linda McMahon of the Department of Education has announced that Harvard should no longer seek to submit any kind of grant proposals to the federal government because it will no longer be receiving any federal money. Harvard University was alerted by the Trump administration that it would cease to qualify for federal funds if it did not begin immediately removing certain practices at the publicly funded university that did not comply with civil rights law, that did not comply with rulings by the Supreme Court of the United States, specifically racial profiling and preferencing that counted down the incoming applications of white students, Asian students, and Jewish students, and gave bonuses to the applications of black students. According to the letter from Secretary McMahon, quote, Harvard University has made a mockery of this country's higher education system. It has invited foreign students who engage in violent behavior and show contempt for the United States of America to its campus. In every way, Harvard has failed to abide by its legal obligations, its ethical and fiduciary duties, its transparency responsibilities, and any semblance of academic rigor. It had scrapped standardized testing requirements and normalized grading systems. This year, Harvard was forced to adopt an embarrassing, quote, remedial math, end quote, program for undergraduates. Why is it, we ask, that Harvard has to teach simple and basic mathematics when it is supposedly so hard to get into this, quote, acclaimed university, end? Who is getting in under such a low standard when others with fabulous grades and a great understanding of the highest level of mathematics are being rejected? She continues by outlining the number of humiliating plagiarism scandals, including hiring failed mayors Bill de Blasio of New York City and Lori Lightfoot of Chicago to teach, quote, leadership at the School of Public Health. McMahon likened this to hiring the captain of the Titanic to teach navigation to future captains of the sea. She said, quote, perhaps most alarmingly, Harvard has failed to abide by the United States Supreme Court's ruling demanding that it end its racial preferencing and continues to engage in ugly racism in its undergraduate and graduate schools, even within the Harvard Law Review itself. Our universities should be bastions of merit that reward and celebrate excellence and achievement. They should not be incubators of discrimination that encourage resentment and instill grievance and racism into our wonderful young Americans. She concludes that because of these and other concerning allegations, quote, this letter is to inform you that Harvard should no longer seek grants from the federal government since none will be provided. Harvard will cease to be a publicly funded institution and can instead operate as a privately funded institution, drawing on its colossal endowment and raising money from its large base of wealthy alumni. You have an approximately $53 billion head start, much of which was made possible by the fact that you are living within the walls of and benefiting from the prosperity secured by the United States of America and its free market system you teach your students to despise. Wow. Before you go, check the description to make sure you're subscribed to the Tony Kinnett Cast. And join us this evening for a closer look at some of the international situations developing, and more importantly, the federal judge standoff here in the United States. I'm Tony Kinnett, and this has been the Daily Signal's Top News in 10. Take care.